Imagine, for just a moment, that you are waking up, but it isn't a normal morning.
Right.
You blink against the harsh, unforgiving, and, sterile fluorescent lights of a hospital room.
Ugh, the absolute worst kind of lighting.
Exactly. And you try to move your arm, maybe just to rub your eyes or something, but your body feels like it's been encased in wet cement.
Oh, wow.
Because you've been in a medically induced coma for months.
Just completely unconscious.
Yeah, and this follows a horrific, near-fatal fall off a cliff.
Yeah.
So you haven't just been sleeping. Your body has been an absolute battlefield.
Right, because of the infections and everything.
Exactly. You've battled severe sepsis. You've been hovering for weeks on that razor-thin edge between life and death.
Your organs essentially threatening to shut down at any second?
Yes, and when you finally manage to pry your eyes open and, actually focus, your partner is sitting there in the visitor's chair.
Which should be a relief.
It should be.
Yeah.
But they aren't just relieved. They are practically vibrating with this enthusiastic, nervous, almost manic energy.
Oh, that's never a good sign.
And they're holding up a set of keys.
Okay, wait, keys to what?
Well, while you were unconscious, while you were literally fighting for every single breath, they didn't just wait by your bedside. They took the liberty of selling your home.
You're kidding me.
Nope. They uprooted your entire established existence. And they moved you both out to an isolated, freezing, deeply foreboding old mansion.
Without even asking.
Right. A mansion sitting right on a crossroads in the middle of the bleak, wintry, and completely unforgiving moors of Dartmoor.
That is genuinely terrifying.
So you are now entirely dependent on this person. You are physically shattered. And the house they've chosen for your so-called recovery feels less like a sanctuary and a whole lot more like a trap waiting to be sprung.
It is an incredibly visceral, deeply unsettling scenario to place yourself into right out of the gate.
It really is.
Because it strips away all your normal defenses, right? Your mobility, your financial independence, your familiar surroundings.
All gone.
You are left completely at the mercy of someone else's choices.
Which is the exact terrifying baseline where we find ourselves in today's deep dive.
Yes.
We are plunging headfirst into a curated stack of excerpts from the psychological thriller novel We Live Here Now.
By the amazing Sarah Pinborough.
Exactly. Now, for those of you out there who devour thrillers, Sarah Pinborough's name probably rings a massive bell.
Oh, definitely. She's the best-selling mastermind behind her eyes.
All right, which had that famously mind-blowing, completely unhinged twist that took over everyone's television screens a couple of years ago.
It really did. People were losing their minds over that ending.
So going into this material, we already know we are in the hands of an author who absolutely loves to pull the rug out from under us.
She's a master of misdirection.
She is. So today, our mission is to untangle this intricate, deeply unsettling web she has woven in this newer work.
Which is quite the undertaking.
It is. We are going to explore the Gothic horror of this house, Larkin Lodge. We'll dissect the incredibly messy, toxic marital secrets our main characters are hiding from each other.
Because there are a lot of them.
So many. And we are going to dive deep into this terrifying concept that a physical environment, the very bricks, the mortar, the floorboards of a house might just be capable of absorbing and then reflecting back our darkest, most suppressed human impulses.
That is such a cool concept.
We have this fascinating blend of the unreliable narration that naturally comes from a genuine medical trauma survivor, mixed with a very real, very haunting psychological mystery.
What's fascinating here is that Pinborough is playing with several layers of horror simultaneously.
Yeah.
And she doesn't let you settle comfortably into any of them. I mean, on the surface, you have what appears to be a very classic, almost traditional haunted house story.
You got the creepy old mansion.
Right. You have the creaking floorboards in the middle of the night, the strange, inexplicable drafts of cold air, the deeply unsettling local history.
All the classic tropes.
Exactly. But the deeper we go into the source material, it becomes really clear that this isn't just a ghost story meant to make you jump.
No, it's doing something much heavier.
It is a profound, incredibly sharp study of human vulnerability. It's this surgical examination of the highly combustible dynamics of couples who are desperately trying to build a future on a foundation of dark secrets.
Secrets and financial ruin.
And unaddressed resentments. It asks us to consider what happens when the architecture around us stops being just a shelter and becomes a mirror for the rot inside our own relationships.
I absolutely love that framing the architecture as a mirror, because we really have to start with the physical space.
We do.
The geography of this story is practically a main character with its own malicious agency. So let's look at the arrival at Larkin Lodge.
Okay.
We have Emily and Freddie. Emily is our protagonist, the one who just miraculously survived the cliff fall, the coma, and the sepsis.
Poor Emily.
Right. They finally pull up to Larkin Lodge in Wiveliscombe. It's a tiny, isolated village right in the heart of Dartmoor.
Literally the middle of nowhere.
And the contrast Pinborough paints here is so striking, it almost gives you whiplash.
Because of the photos, right?
Yes. Emily is sitting in the passenger seat looking up at this imposing, heavy stone house, and she is mentally comparing it to the photos Freddie showed her on his phone back when she was still confined to our hospital bed.
Which looked totally different.
Completely. In those pictures, it was the height of summer. The front garden was bursting with color, vibrant, full of life, practically glowing with the promise of a fresh start.
A total real estate fantasy.
Exactly. But their reality upon actually arriving is unbelievably bleak. It's the dead of winter. Everything is covered in this icy, gray, oppressive mist.
The ground is just hard and frozen and dead.
And Emily's physical reality perfectly mirrors this harshness. We get this visceral, painful description of her just trying to get out of the car.
Just opening the door is an ordeal.
She pushes the door open, swings her bad, atrophied leg out, and has to grit her teeth against the blinding pain just to hold herself upright.
She has to lean heavily on her walking stick.
Yes. Her joints are screaming. The sharp, freezing air feels like powdered icing, sugar-coating her lungs, making her hack and cough.
That is such a vivid image.
The wind sweeping off the moor is cutting right through her thick winter coat. She is immediately established as overwhelmingly vulnerable.
She is not a final girl ready to grab a weapon and fight a supernatural entity.
Not at all. She can barely walk up the front steps without assistance.
That physical vulnerability is so crucial to the classic Gothic trope of isolation, but it's really updated here for a modern audience.
How so?
Well, the author is meticulously establishing a perimeter of helplessness. Larkin Lodge doesn't sit in a cozy, welcoming suburban neighborhood where you can just knock on a neighbor's door if the power goes out.
All right, there's no popping over to borrow some sugar.
Exactly. It stands completely alone on a high hill, accessible only by a sharp turn off a winding country lane marked by old, low, crumbling stone walls.
And beyond it.
Beyond it is just untamed, wild, aggressive moorland. There are no quaint flocks of sheep, no picturesque cows, just uneven, treacherous ground, boggy patches, and sharp, rocky outcrops.
It sounds totally desolate.
It is the very definition of desolate. And what's brilliant is how the characters themselves attempt to contextualize this isolation through literature.
Oh, I love this part.
Emily looks out at the freezing fog and immediately says, I feel like I'm in a Bronte novel.
Right.
But she specifically notes to herself that it reminds her of Wuthering Heights, the wild, destructive, all-consuming passion, and specifically the ghost of Kathy Earnshaw pleading at the window.
Her wrist rubbing against the broken glass, begging to be let inside from the moors.
Yes, it's a profoundly dark, tragic, and violent association to have with your new home.
And Freddie's reaction to that comment is so telling. He completely misses the dark undertone.
Completely flies over his head.
He replies with his forced cheerfulness, "Does that make me Mr. Rochester? Are you my Jane Eyre?"
Which is so funny.
It is. Emily knows, and we the audience know, that he's only referencing Jane Eyre because he likes to pretend he reads the classics to sound intellectual.
But he really doesn't.
No. In reality, Emily notes he's more of a few Lee Childs on holiday kind of reader.
No shade to Jack Reacher.
Not at all. But it's a completely different vibe. Freddie is trying to force this romantic, heroic, rescuing husband narrative onto a situation that Emily's subconscious intuitively recognizes as tragic and foreboding.
He wants to be the brooding but ultimately devoted hero.
Exactly, the Jane Eyre hero, while Emily senses the destructive, ghostly doom of Wuthering Heights.
It's a perfect encapsulation of their dynamic. It highlights the fundamental gaping disconnect between them right from the moment they pull into the driveway.
They're just not on the same page.
Not at all. But bringing it back to the geography itself, think about how physical isolation amplifies psychological distress.
Oh, for sure.
When you are removed from your community, your friends, your coworkers, your usual support systems, your entire grasp on reality becomes dependent on the immediate environment.
And the people within it.
Exactly. We see this in extreme environments all the time. Researchers in Antarctica, people on isolated lighthouses.
You have to trust the people you're with.
And for Emily, she is relying entirely for her physical and emotional survival on a partner who unilaterally made a massive life decision while she was incapacitated.
Terrifying.
If you can't fully trust your environment because it feels hostile and you're starting to suspect you can't fully trust your partner's motivations, the isolation turns from a peaceful country retreat into an inescapable pressure cooker.
It really does. And the house itself seems to know it has them trapped.
It absolutely does.
Because before we even officially meet Emily and Freddie in the narrative, before they pull up in that car, we're introduced to the Watcher.
Yes, the prologue.
The prologue of the book is utterly fascinating because it opens from the perspective of a bird, a raven.
Such a great choice.
This raven has been watching this heavy stone house on the crossroads for an entire incredibly long year.
Just waiting.
He watches through the freezing, bitter winter, the gentle, deceptive spring, the baking, suffocating summer, where its dark feathers heat up like sticky tarmac.
And we learn why it's watching.
We do. This raven knows its mate is dead. Its mate died inside Larkin Lodge.
But it won't go in.
The raven absolutely refuses to go inside to investigate or mourn. The text explicitly says the raven knows it should move on by now, find another mate, enjoy the endless sweeping skies over the moors.
But it stays anchored to this spot.
And the crucial line from the prologue is this: he has never liked the house. It stirs something inside him that speaks so loudly of danger that when he heard her cries, he did not follow her in.
The symbolism of the raven here is incredibly potent and carefully chosen.
How so?
Ravens are, by nature, carrion birds. They are naturally drawn to death, to decay, to the aftermath of violence in nature. They thrive on it.
Right, it's their food source.
And yet this specific bird, which biologically requires death to survive, is terrified of this house.
It won't even go near the building.
It recognizes a malevolence in the bricks and mortar that goes far beyond the natural, acceptable cycle of life and death.
That is so creepy.
Animal instinct is, of course, a very common trope in the horror genre. You have the family dog that barks aggressively at the empty corner of the nursery.
Or the cat that hisses and arches its back at the closed closet door.
Exactly. But dedicating an entire, beautifully written prologue to the grief and the sheer terror of a raven sets a profoundly dark, almost mythic tone for the rest of the book.
It really establishes the stake.
It tells you that the danger residing in Larkin Lodge isn't just a human misunderstanding or a trick of the light. It's a tangible, radiating ancient force that nature itself repels and fears.
I'm so glad you brought up the mythic tone, because it perfectly foreshadows a detail with the local vicar's book club later in the excerpts.
Oh, right, Vicar Paul.
Vicar Paul Bradley Carr, who we'll talk a lot more about later, mentions in passing that his little village book club just wrapped up reading Edgar Allan Poe's The Raven.
Which is just a great little Easter egg.
It is. And another character, the bohemian artist Sally, softly points out during conversation, ravens are drawn to death. Did you know that?
It's all intricately interconnected.
Pinborough's weaving this thread of doom right from page 1. But before we get to the locals and their book clubs, I have to talk about one of the creepiest, most unsettling motifs woven throughout the text.
The song.
The nursery rhyme. Scattered through the narrative, often interrupting deeply tense moments, are lyrics from a children's song called Happy House by Stella Maidman and Lorena Roberts.
It's so unnerving.
The lyrics on paper are so basic. They go, it's a house, it's a happy house, it's a happy house. Can you see? Here's a window, here's a door, here's a roof, here's a floor. It's a house, it's a happy house for you and me.
It's a brilliant exercise in atmospheric dissonance. Think about how effectively horror uses corruption of innocence.
Right, like creepy dolls or whatever.
Exactly. You take something inherently innocent, something designed specifically to teach toddlers the basic, comforting, fundamental components of domestic life, identifying a window, a door, a roof.
And you aggressively juxtapose it against the bleak, deadly complex adult reality of Larkin Lodge.
It serves as this mocking, almost sarcastic Greek chorus, commenting on Freddie's desperate, flailing attempt to force this happy domestic life onto a profoundly fractured relationship.
Because he literally bought the house to create a happy ending.
A fresh start, yeah. But the rhyme, placed within the context of a psychological thriller, feels like a taunt from the house itself.
Like the house is laughing at them.
It strips the concept of a home down to its barest architectural bones, reminding you that a house is just a structure of wood and stone. It takes the people inside to make it a home, to make it happy.
Or, in the case of Emily and Freddie, to make it a living nightmare.
Yeah.
I always find it so unsettling when horror movies use those slow, slightly distorted music box versions of nursery rhymes.
It taps into this primal fear.
A fear that the things meant to keep us safe as children are actually sinister.
Yeah.
So, taking all this in the bleak geography, the terrified raven, the mocking nursery rhymes, what does this all mean for Emily's state of mind?
It's not great.
No, it's not. This brings us to the second major layer of the narrative: unreliable realities and profound medical trauma.
We really need to unpack Emily's medical past in detail here.
Because it completely dictates how we, as the reader, and she, as the protagonist, experience the haunting of Larkin Lodge.
She didn't just have a minor car accident or a bad bout of the flu.
She fell off a cliff. She was placed in a medically induced coma. While under, she contracted severe sepsis.
Which is incredibly dangerous.
And on top of all that catastrophic physical trauma, she lost her job in London. She was let go right after putting in all the grueling groundwork to secure a major promotion.
She is completely reeling, both physically and professionally.
This is where Pinborough grounds the supernatural elements in terrifying, verifiable medical reality. The author isn't just using trauma as a buzzword.
She gets very specific.
She really does. In the excerpts, Emily reads a medical leaflet detailing post-sepsis syndrome.
And if we actually look at the symptoms listed on that leaflet, which align with real-world medical data, you have the physical ones.
Like crushing fatigue.
Difficulty sleeping, severe muscle and joint pain, shortness of breath, reduced organ function. That alone is enough to break a person's spirit.
Absolutely.
But the mental and emotional symptoms are what make the narrative so brilliant and so agonizing.
The cognitive stuff.
Right. Auditory and visual hallucinations, severe panic attacks, extreme mood swings, vivid nightmares, intense brain fog, short-term memory loss, and severe PTSD.
It's a horrifying list.
By introducing genuine, documented medical trauma with these specific, terrifying cognitive symptoms, the author creates the ultimate unreliable narrator.
But importantly, she does it with deep empathy.
Yes. Emily isn't making things up for attention. She isn't naturally prone to hysterics. Her brain and her body have literally been through a catastrophic chemical and physical war.
Taking that a step further, think about the self-doubt that instills. When Emily starts experiencing weird things in the house.
The haunting elements.
Right. When she hears strange, heavy creaking coming from the empty upstairs corridor. Or when she feels a sudden, unnatural, cold draft that seems to target her specifically.
Or the really terrifying one.
The footprints.
Yes.
When she wakes up to find dirty footprints trailing through the house, and she has to assume she must have been sleepwalking outside in the freezing mud.
She immediately turns the suspicion inward.
She totally does. She questions her own sanity before she questions the house. She tells herself, my brain isn't to be trusted right now. Post-sepsis syndrome, that's what the doctors call it. It's just my synapses misfiring.
The absolute genius of this framing is that we, as the audience, are trapped right there in the cognitive fog with her.
We don't know what's real either.
Exactly. Is the house actually haunted? Is there a malicious spirit walking the halls? Or is she having a severe post-sepsis hallucination?
Are the muddy footprints from a ghost, a physical intruder sneaking in, or her own dirty feet moving through a dissociative fugue state?
It's a devastating trap. It locks the character into an endless loop of self-gaslighting.
Which is so tragic.
When you fundamentally cannot trust your own senses, how on earth do you fight back against an external threat?
You can't.
The answer is you don't. Because you are forced to spend all your limited, precious energy trying to convince yourself the threat isn't even real. You become paralyzed by doubt.
And Freddie, her husband, constantly reinforces this self-doubt.
He is always right there with an excuse.
Whenever she tentatively brings up a weird noise or a draft, he is right there with a perfectly rational, perfectly soothing explanation. It's just the old pipe, Sam. It's just the wind off the moor. You're just tired. Let's get you back to bed.
He positions himself as her anchor to reality.
But the chilling question becomes, is he anchoring her to objective reality? Or is he anchoring her to a reality he is actively manipulating to keep her docile?
It's definitely the latter. The way he smooths over her concerns is so patronizing.
It really is, which perfectly leads us to examine the facade of their perfect marriage because, let's be honest, it is a massive, crumbling facade.
A total illusion.
Let's look really closely at Freddie. On the surface, if you were just observing them from across a room, he plays the role of the devoted, supportive husband beautifully.
He really performs it well.
He's the guy who holds up the keys in the rehab center and says with a brave smile, marriage is teamwork. You wanted a quiet life in the country before the accident, and I'm totally on board with that now.
He handles all the logistics, he packs up their London life, he moves them, he meticulously unpacks all the boxes before she even arrives from the hospital so she won't be stressed.
He's standing there cooking homemade pasta on the Aga stove when she walks in.
But the cracks in this performance are immediately visible if you know what to look for.
They are massive structural cracks. First, there's the very physical manifestation of his profound discomfort in the space.
The temperature thing.
Yes. Even though the heating is cranked up, and even though there are literal fires blazing in the grates, Freddie is constantly, inexplicably freezing.
He is walking around his own house with a thick scarf wrapped tightly around his neck.
Meanwhile, Emily's friends come up from London to visit. They're wearing thin tops, and they are perfectly fine.
The house is clearly uplifting him physically. It is draining his warmth, almost rejecting his presence.
It visually suggests a fundamental, deep-seated incompatibility, not just with the architecture of the house, but with the entire life he is pretending to build there.
And for those listening who might not be familiar with British country homes, you really have to clarify the Aga stove detail because it makes Freddie's freezing even more bizarre.
I was just going to say that. An Aga isn't just a regular oven you turn on for 30 minutes to bake a pizza.
Not at all.
It's a massive, extremely heavy cast iron cooker that stays on all the time, 24/7. It acts as a massive heat source for the entire kitchen, sometimes the whole ground floor.
It radiates intense warmth.
So for Freddie to be standing next to an Aga cooking pasta and still be shivering so hard he needs a winter scarf indoors, that is profoundly unnatural. It's a huge red flag.
It is a great catch regarding the Aga. It underscores the unnaturalness of his state. And as we read deeper into the provided excerpts, the real ugly secrets behind his performance start to spill out.
Freddie isn't just the enthusiastic, supportive husband who made a sacrifice for his wife's health.
We discover he has accumulated massive, crippling gambling debts. Massive. He was literally gambling away their life savings, their entire financial safety net, while Emily was lying in a hospital bed fighting for her life against sepsis.
He sold their London home not to buy her a dream country retreat, but because he was drowning in debt and needed to flee his creditors and downsize drastically.
He is hiding a monumental betrayal.
But the brilliance of Pinborough's writing is that she doesn't make Emily a pure, innocent victim in all of this. Emily is deeply flawed, too.
She has her own dark secrets.
She feels this immense gnawing guilt over what she vaguely refers to in her internal monologue as a stupid transgression. And we eventually learn that she is secretly blackmailing their mutual friend from London, Mark.
Which is wild.
She knows a damaging secret about him, and she is extorting him for large sums of money to secretly rebuild her own life and have an escape fund.
Think about how cold-hearted you have to be to extort a friend to save yourself while playing the role of their recovering, helpless wife.
It really makes you think about the sunk cost fallacy in relationships, doesn't it?
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
How many of us have stayed in a bad situation, a bad job, a bad relationship, just because we've already invested so much time into it?
Emily and Freddie are a couple bound together not by love or trust, but by mutual flaws, devastating secrets, and shared trauma.
They are desperately performing the role of a happily married couple in a rustic country house. Emily literally notes to herself at one point that they have to try harder, that they shouldn't become like all those other couples, staying together out of habit.
But that is precisely what they're doing.
They are going through the motions, but the foundation of their marriage is totally rotten with deceit, financial ruin, and unspoken resentment.
Larkin Lodge is an environment that, as we'll see, requires complete transparency and honesty to survive. And they are bringing a highly volatile, combustible mix of lies right to its front door.
It's like bringing a lit match into a room full of gas.
Which brings us to the broader environment. Because what is a Gothic thriller without a creepy, isolated village full of strange lore and eccentric locals?
You have to have the strange locals.
Let's venture down the hill into Wivliscombe and meet the cheerful, aggressively pleasant local vicar, Paul Bradley Carr of St. Olaf's Church.
Emily goes there seeking some connection.
Or maybe just an excuse to leave the freezing house. But she goes to the church, and she is immediately struck by the 15th century stained glass windows behind the altar.
These are not your typical church windows.
Normally, you go into an ancient country church, and you expect to see comforting, serene imagery. You expect saints with halos, shepherds tending flocks, maybe some doves or a peaceful nativity scene.
Not at St. Olaf's.
Far from it. St. Olaf's features massive stained glass panels depicting red and blue demons with pointed tails, cloven hooves, and incredibly sharp teeth.
Leering and grinning maliciously.
As they aim pitchforks and tridents at naked, terrified human figures, actively running them into raging, eternal fires.
It is purely punitive, terrifying, apocalyptic imagery meant to instill absolute dread.
Emily is naturally taken aback by this. She points it out to Vicar Paul, asking something to the effect of, surely the villagers would want comforting images while they prayed. Why would you want to stare at literal hellfire while seeking solace?
And the vicar's justification provides this incredible, dense historical context that immediately colors how we view the entire region.
What does he tell her?
He explains the 15th century was unimaginably brutal to this specific part of Devon. They had the plague, they had smallpox outbreaks, they had crop failures and famine.
Just a terrible time to be alive.
Exactly. And the church at the time, completely unable to explain the science of disease or stop the immense suffering of the peasantry, deflected the blame.
They blame supernatural forces.
They blamed the devil. And this deliberate scapegoating created mass panic and hysteria in the village, leading to a fair number of local men and women being accused of witchcraft and subsequently hanged or drowned in the local ponds.
It's a fascinating inclusion of actual historical sociology. By bringing this up, the vicar is establishing that pain, suffering, paranoia, and the violent scapegoating of neighbors are literally baked into the heritage of the area.
The soil of Wivliscombe is soaked in the blood of innocent people who were murdered simply out of fear and ignorance.
The stained glass wasn't meant to comfort the grieving.
It was designed as a threat. It was designed to remind the congregation of the horrific punishments awaiting them if they strayed from the flock or questioned the authority of the church.
Thematically, this sets a massive precedent for Larkin Lodge. It establishes that this environment has a long, documented history of brutalizing the vulnerable.
It normalizes the idea that malevolent forces, or perhaps more terrifyingly, the human belief in malevolent forces, can drive ordinary, seemingly good people to commit horrific acts of violence against their own neighbors.
It totally sets the stage for the modern-day eccentrics wandering around Wivliscombe, too, because it's not all just ancient history.
Enter Joe and Sally Carter.
Yes. They are this striking bohemian artist couple who actually lived in Larkin Lodge themselves about 20 years ago. Emily meets them down at the local village pub, the Lamb and Shepherd.
Joe is described as deeply, almost aggressively charismatic.
He bleeds this intense sexual charisma that gives him the air of a weathered movie star. He's a painter, and his primary subjects are nude models.
Specifically, local, impressionable young women from the village.
And Sally, his wife, acts as his manager. She claims to be entirely chill, completely cool with his intense, intimate, artistic process.
She casually drops terms like polyamory and talks about how she totally understands his need for muses.
And how she doesn't mind his intense connections with these beautiful young things who clearly have massive crushes on him. She presents herself to Emily as the ultimate, secure, enlightened, evolved partner who is above petty jealousy.
They curate this very specific, very practiced image of 1960s free love, artistic temperament, and avant-garde detachment.
They want to be seen as transcending traditional bourgeois marital norms.
But Pinborough, with a great sense of pacing, almost immediately undermines this carefully constructed facade through the power of local gossip.
Emily brings in Marilee Watkins to help sort out the overgrown gardens at Larkin Lodge.
Marilee is great. She is this earthy, solid, no-nonsense local woman who has lived in the area her whole life.
She is the keeper of the village secrets.
And Marilee completely shatters Sally's cool girl image with a few sentences.
Marilee does not hold back. She reveals that back in the day, 20 years ago when they actually lived in the lodge, Sally wasn't chill at all.
She was, in Marilee's exact words, mad as a hatter with jealousy.
Specifically, she became obsessively, dangerously jealous of a woman named Georgina Usher.
Georgina was a beautiful, dark-haired artist who taught part-time at the local village school and attended some of Joe's exclusive art classes up at Larkin Lodge.
Marilee tells Emily that Sally's insecurity over Joe's attention to Georgina was literally eating her alive.
She lost a shocking amount of weight. She stopped sleeping. She was seen wandering the lanes at all hours, and she effectively began stalking Georgina.
And all of this manic paranoia culminated in a terrifying, very public confrontation.
The description of that confrontation is chilling because of how calculated it was. Merrily described how Sally calmly walked into the local village liquor store while Georgina was at the counter.
Sally didn't yell or scream.
She calmly took the bottles of beer right out of Georgina's hands, set them on the counter, and told her clearly and in front of the shopkeeper that if Georgina didn't leave Joe alone, she would slit her throat.
It is a massive, shocking escalation. We go from private, obsessive jealousy to a public, highly specific, violent death threat.
And the kicker that sends Emily's imagination into overdrive.
Immediately after this public death threat, Georgina vanished in the middle of the night.
Left her rented cottage, left her job. No one in the village ever saw her again.
Right. So Emily's true crime radar goes off immediately. We all listen to those podcasts. We know the formula.
She hears jealous wife plus public death threat plus vanished in the night, and her brain does the math.
She starts firmly suspecting that Joe and Sally conspired to murder Georgina Usher up at Larkin Lodge and buried her on the moors.
She thinks she has uncovered the dark, bloody secret of the house.
She assumes the haunting, the strange noises, the cold drafts are all the restless spirit of this murdered young artist crying out for justice. It makes perfect narrative sense.
It does make perfect sense, and that's exactly why Pinborough uses it. It's an exercise in narrative misdirection. The author deliberately sets up a perfect, almost cliched, true crime scenario.
The fiercely jealous wife, the charismatic, philandering husband, the missing, beautiful younger woman.
We, alongside Emily, feel a sense of smug satisfaction that we figured out the puzzle so early on.
But then, Pinborough brilliantly pulls the rug out from under us and the protagonist.
Emily, trying to be a sleuth, subtly probes Vicar Paul about the missing woman, hoping for some confirmation of foul play or local rumors of a body.
And the vicar simply looks at her and says, "Emily, Georgina Usher isn't dead."
I genuinely laughed out loud at that moment. It was so unexpected.
The vicar literally pulls out his smartphone, Googles Georgina's name, and shows Emily the screen. He explains that she didn't get murdered, she just moved to America.
She's a highly successful, famous artist now living in New York or somewhere similar.
The local school she used to work at even recently named their new art department after her. She didn't fall victim to a grisly murder. She just realized she was dealing with an absolutely unhinged, violent woman in a tiny village and logically decided to move to another continent to live her best life and focus on her career.
It is such a funny, grounding moment in the middle of all this Gothic dread.
It is a brilliant subversion of genre expectations. By completely, factually debunking the Georgina Usher murder theory, Pinborough forces Emily, and by extension, you, the listener, to realize that the true darkness lurking in Larkin Lodge isn't going to be some neat, easily solvable mystery straight out of a podcast.
The real horror isn't a buried body in the garden.
The real horror is much deeper, much more personal, and far more supernatural in its mechanics. It forces Emily to stop looking at the neighbors and start looking elsewhere for the source of the malicious energy in her home.
It forces her to look at the house itself.
Which means we need to talk about the house itself. Because Larkin Lodge isn't just a passive building where bad things happen to occur. The text strongly implies it is a building that actively causes bad things to happen.
Emily, having hit a dead end with Georgina, starts digging into the local archives at the village library, scrolling through digitized newspaper clippings and property records.
And she uncovers what we can only call the hunger of Larkin Lodge.
The recorded history of the house is an unrelenting catalog of human tragedy. In 1864, a man named Christopher Hopper bought the house after it had been mysteriously gutted by a fire.
He spent a fortune rebuilding it, but he and his wife Hannah left the area soon after under a cloud of misery.
He died 15 years later, and Hannah died of what the records call a broken heart only 2 months after him.
Fast forward to 1958, a glamorous actress named Fortuna Carmichael and her producer husband Gerald moved in. They were famous in the tabloids for their fiery, passionate romance, but also their violent, explosive spats.
And Gerald ended up dying in the house under stressful circumstances.
The pattern is undeniable. Couples move in hoping for a retreat, and the house destroys them.
And we have to remember the geography we discussed earlier. The house sits precisely on a crossroads.
Emily realizes through her research that historically, in rural England, crossroads were traditional burial sites.
They were unconsecrated ground used to bury outcasts, criminals, people who died by suicide, or the restless dead. Essentially, anyone who wasn't allowed to be buried in the holy ground of the churchyard.
The very physical foundation of the house is built on top of misunderstood, unhappiness, marginalized trauma, and communal rejection.
This brings us to a really fascinating, extreme, supernatural application of environmental psychology.
How does that work here?
In the real world, environmental psychology studies how our physical spaces profoundly impact our mood, behavior, and cognitive function. We know this intuitively.
Right. A cluttered, windowless room increases cortisol and causes anxiety.
A room with high ceilings and natural light improves focus and encourages abstract thinking. The brutalist architecture of the 1970s has been linked in some studies to feelings of alienation and community depression.
But Pinborough takes this proven science and proposes a terrifying supernatural inversion.
What if the house doesn't just passively affect you, but actively absorbs your psychological state? What if the physical bricks, the mortar, the heavy oak beams literally drink in the misery, the bitter arguments, the deceit, and the suppressed, boiling rage of the people living inside it?
Yes. There is literally a line where one of the local characters describes the house by saying, "It eats you up, devours your being."
Larkin Lodge acts as a massive sponge for human trauma.
Once it's completely full, once it has absorbed all it can, it starts wringing that trauma back out, dripping it onto the new occupants.
It acts as a beacon, practically humming on a frequency that attracts couples who have dark secrets and deep flaws.
Couples who are perfectly primed to explode. Couples exactly like Freddie and Emily.
Which leads us to the massive mid-story revelation regarding Joe and Sally Carter. Because while Emily was wrong about them murdering Georgina, she wasn't wrong about them being killers.
Emily finally realizes that Joe did commit murder at Larkin Lodge 20 years ago. He murdered his own wife. He murdered Sally.
Okay, I know anyone listening is immediately thinking, wait, what? But Emily just had tapas with Sally. She was literally sitting on Sally's velvet couch at her cottage, smoking a joint and listening to her talk about polyamory and art. How on earth can Sally be dead?
And this is where the mythology of the book gets incredibly wild.
The chill, bohemian, older Sally that Emily met and had drinks with is actually Sally's spirit inhabiting a completely new, different, older body.
It is a staggering, bizarre revelation that recontextualizes all their previous interactions. Once you know the twist, the text is full of clues.
The new Sally says things to Emily like, getting out of the shower in front of the bathroom mirror has been a horror story that's taking some getting used to, but I shouldn't complain. I thought it was stuck in there forever.
She isn't talking about aging. She is talking about the body dysmorphia of stealing a stranger's corpse.
The reality is that Joe, in a fit of rage 20 years ago, murdered the original, young, intensely jealous Sally inside Larkin Lodge.
We really need to walk through the mechanics of this soul-splitting concept because it is both horrifying and fascinating.
Because Larkin Lodge is this supernatural battery charged by misery. When Joe violently killed Sally within its walls, the sheer force of the trauma combined with the energy of the house literally tore her soul in two.
The narrative explains that one part of her soul, the part that still desperately loved Joe, the part that wanted to survive, managed to escape the house.
It wandered until it eventually found this new, older host body to inhabit. This allowed her to return to Joe and continue this weird, twisted, intensely codependent continuation of their marriage in a new form.
But the other half of her soul, the angry, traumatized, violently murdered half it couldn't escape, it was permanently trapped in the primary suite of Larkin Lodge for 2 decades.
And that trapped, fragmented half of the soul is exactly what has been haunting Emily.
It isn't a sentient ghost trying to communicate. It's more like a traumatic recording skipping on a record player. It is repeating the echoes of its own brutal murder.
That unexplained nail sticking up in the floorboards that keeps appearing and disappearing, tearing at Emily's feet. That was the exact spot where Sally died.
The slamming windows, the terrifying sound of the bedroom door slowly opening and creaking shut in the dead of night, the sudden phantom smell of ash in the air.
It is the trauma of domestic violence literally trapped in the architecture. The house forces the new female occupant, Emily, to viscerally experience the sensory echoes of the previous female occupant's murder. It's a cyclical nightmare.
But Emily is not a passive victim. She is an incredibly resilient survivor. Once she pieces this all together, she actually confronts this trapped spirit.
In Chapter 61, she deliberately sends Freddie away on an errand. She goes upstairs to the primary suite, stands her ground, and speaks directly to the house and the ghost.
She righteously demands the spirit leave. She says, "I know the secret of the house now. I know what happened to you here. I'm prepared."
And through sheer force of will and understanding, she somehow manages to sever the tie. She frees the trapped, angry half of Sally's soul from the bedroom, allowing it to fly out and reunite with the other half currently living with Joe down in the village.
It's framed as this profound moment of female solidarity. Emily, herself a recent victim of immense physical trauma, recognizes and validates the trapped, hidden trauma of another woman.
By acknowledging the violence that happened in that room, she acts as the catalyst for Sally's release. It feels like a massive victory.
But, and this is the crucial, devastating turning point of the novel, freeing Sally doesn't actually fix Emily's core problems. In fact, it does the opposite.
It gives Emily a fatal, false sense of agency and control.
Exactly. Sorry, taking that a step further, it leads her right into a trap of her own making. Which brings us to the climax of the story. Human flaws versus supernatural influence.
Because Emily's grand plan following the exorcism is both triumphant in her own mind and entirely objectively boomed.
After freeing Sally's spirit, Emily feels totally empowered. She sits out in the freezing courtyard, sipping tea, looking up at the stone walls, feeling like she has successfully conquered the ghosts of Larkin Lodge.
She resolves right then and there not to be another tragic statistic of the house. She looks at her messy, debt-ridden marriage and says to herself, "We are not like those other historical couples. We are going to survive this."
She makes a very conscious, deliberate choice to accept Freddie's massive flaws. She decides she will formally forgive his crippling gambling debts.
She will use the money she is actively extorting from Mark in London to bail them out of ruin.
And she plans to pack up, sell Larkin Lodge, and move them to the south of France to open a quaint bed and breakfast or an Airbnb.
She genuinely believes she has outsmarted the ancient curse of the house by embracing what she considers radical honesty, with herself at least, if not with Freddie. She accepts that they are broken, and she thinks that acceptance is their armor.
But the tragic irony is practically screaming at the reader. She thinks she's acting out of love, agency, and maturity, but she is fundamentally building her utopian, sunny French future on the proceeds of a literal blackmail scheme.
She justifies it to herself, saying, "We're both flawed. We can both be extremely selfish. He's gambled away all our money, and I've cold-heartedly blackmailed one of our oldest friends to save us. Neither of us is perfect, but at least we're whole."
She believes this shared, acknowledged moral bankruptcy makes them immune to the judgment of the house.
It is a devastating, fatal miscalculation. The house hasn't let her go. It has merely stopped using Sally's loud, disruptive ghost to distract her.
By removing the supernatural threat, the house has lulled Emily into a complete false sense of security.
It has caused her to lower her defenses, allowing her own human flaws and her husband's desperate human flaws to fester completely unguarded.
She thinks the haunting is over, so she stops watching her back. She assumes the threat was external when the real threat is making her a cup of tea in the kitchen.
And then Pinborough delivers an absolute masterclass in perspective shifting. We are lulled into Emily's hopeful, sun-drenched daydreams of France, and then we slam face first into chapter 82.
And suddenly, without warning, the narrative shifts entirely into Freddie's point of view, and the very first words of the chapter are pure, visceral, hyperventilating panic.
Oh, fuck. The narrative violently snaps from Emily's hopeful planning to Freddie sliding down the kitchen cabinet, sitting on the cold floor, completely unable to take his eyes off his wife.
Emily is dead on the kitchen floor.
It is a brutal, breathless plot twist. Freddie has stabbed her to death. And the way his internal monologue processes the murder in the immediate aftermath is chilling in its banality.
He isn't cackling like a supervillain.
He thinks, "How did she die so fast? I didn't even realize I'd stabbed her. I was so angry. She was yelling about the money, and I just gripped the knife tighter, and then I can't even finish the thought."
He didn't plot a premeditated murder. He didn't drop a floor plan. It was a sudden, blinding flash of uncontrollable, fatal rage triggered by an argument over his debts.
Which opens up a massive debate. Who holds the ultimate blame here? Was this murder entirely the result of Freddie's latent resentment, his toxic masculinity, and his sheer financial panic boiling over because Emily finally confronted him?
Or did the house, acting as that supernatural battery, push his mind into doing it? Emily herself noted earlier in the book that the house seemed to bring out the absolute worst in his residents, making them snipe and fight in ways that she claimed wasn't like us.
I would argue it's a terrifying synthesis of both, and that's where the true horror lies. Larkin Lodge operates like a supernatural pressure cooker for human frailty.
Freddie was already fundamentally a weak and deceitful man. He lied easily. He gambled away their future. He faked his enthusiasm for her recovery to cover his tracks.
He was a dry, brittle bundle of kindling waiting for a spark. The house simply provided that spark. It amplified his existing anger. It perhaps clouded his judgment and lowered his inhibitions for that one fatal, irreversible second when he gripped the handle of the kitchen knife.
The supernatural element of the house doesn't absolve Freddie of his moral or legal guilt. Rather, it identifies and ruthlessly exploits his existing capacity for violence. It uses him as a tool.
I completely agree. Because look at what he does next. His immediate reaction isn't to call emergency services. He doesn't attempt CPR. He doesn't weep over her body.
His instinct for self-preservation kicks in instantly. He hears the gravel crunching outside as merrily the workers arrive, and his white-cold panic forces him into immediate pragmatic action.
He mechanically scrubs Emily's blood from his hands in the sink. He picks up her lifeless body, and his only thought is about where to hide her so he doesn't get caught.
And he decides, the room at the top of the house, that's where I'll put her. No one goes up there.
It is the ultimate grim confirmation of the house's power. He is physically placing her corpse in the exact same architectural space, the primary suite, where the house has historically consumed its previous female residents.
By hiding her there, he is literally feeding Emily to the house. He is ensuring that her massive trauma, her ultimate betrayal by the man she loved, and her violent death will soak deeply into those floorboards, fully charging the battery, ready to haunt whoever is unlucky enough to buy Larkin Lodge next.
The cycle is completely unbroken.
It is so incredibly bleak. I remember finishing that chapter and just staring at the wall. But Pinborough doesn't end it there. There is one final, strange, almost triumphant twist in the aftermath.
Chapter 83 shifts the focus away from the house and down into the village, to a conversation between Emily and the vicar. Now, chronologically in the text provided, this seems to occur just before her fatal confrontation with Freddie, or it represents a non-linear, almost omniscient resolution to the secondary plot.
Emily is sitting in the church with Vicar Paul, and Paul is completely devastated. Why? Because Joe Carter, the intensely charismatic artist who murdered his first wife 20 years ago, has suddenly and inexplicably died.
And the specific details surrounding Joe's sudden death are deeply, wonderfully suspicious. Sally, the new, older Sally, who now houses the newly whole, reintegrated spirit of the original Sally, told the vicar she had gone out for a long, vigorous hill walk on the moors.
Joe was staying behind in a rental cottage to paint an enormous, ambitious canvas of her. He had complained earlier of a mild headache and feeling a bit off.
And while she was conveniently miles away on the moor with a rock-solid alibi, he suffered a massive, fatal medical event and died alone.
We have to connect the dots here for you listening, because it's brilliant. Remember, Emily freed the angry, violently traumatized, trapped half of Sally's soul from the bedroom at Larkin Lodge.
That enraged spirit flew down to the village and reunited with the chill, detached version of Sally living with Joe.
And clearly, the newly whole, entirely unchill, fully realized spirit of Sally finally took her long-awaited revenge on the man who brutally murdered her 2 decades ago. She murdered him and made it look like a natural death.
It is a phenomenal, highly satisfying structural choice by Pinborough. She elegantly ties up the supernatural vengeance subplot. Sally gets her retribution. The traditional ghost story arc has a satisfying, almost triumphant, feminist conclusion. The abuser is punished.
But she contrasts this sharp, satisfying victory against the main narrative. There is no triumphant resolution for Emily. The human tragedy, Emily's brutal murder at the hands of her weak, panicked, profoundly human husband, is left as a bleak, realistic, unresolved horror.
The supernatural entity successfully escapes to freedom and gets justice, while the living, breathing human woman is left dead on the cold kitchen floor, her body dragged to the attic like garbage. It highlights the often unfair, brutal nature of reality versus the satisfying arcs of ghost stories.
Wow. Okay, let's take a deep breath and try to synthesize this entire massive deep dive. We have journeyed from a creepy, freezing, isolated stone house on the unforgiving moors of Dartmoor.
We've navigated through a dizzying, terrifying labyrinth of genuine medical trauma, post-sepsis hallucinations, and deep, toxic marital deceit.
We explored the dark history of a village whose very soil is soaked in the blood of medieval witch trials and paranoia. We unmasked a bohemian, charismatic artist as a brutal domestic murderer.
And we witnessed a shocking dual conclusion. A supernatural revenge, successfully and quietly executed, contrasted with a very human, very tragic murder born not of ghosts, but of financial panic and mundane resentment.
The so what, for us, as readers and listeners, is profound. We Live Here Now isn't simply a spooky book about a cursed, drafty building on a hill. It is a stark, unflinching cautionary tale about the secrets we choose to keep from the people we share our lives, our bank accounts, and our beds with.
It warns us that unaddressed resentment, financial deceit, and the stubborn refusal to communicate honestly will inevitably find a way to manifest.
Sometimes that manifestation is a slow, quiet, sad drifting apart over decades. And sometimes, if the pressure is high enough, if the secrets are dark enough, and if the environment is toxic enough, it manifests violently.
The walls around us don't necessarily create our internal demons, but they can certainly trap them in the room with us, forcing us to finally face them.
We've spent this entire time talking about how the stone and wood of an old Victorian house might absorb our emotions and our trauma. But I want to leave you with a different, perhaps more modern, provocative thought to mull over.
Okay, I'm ready.
Think about the era we live in now. We don't just live in silent brick houses anymore. We live in smart homes.
Oh, wow.
We have devices in our kitchens, our bedrooms, and our living rooms that are literally hardwired to listen to us. They record our voices, they track our movements, they learn our schedules, our preferences, and our habits.
They know everything.
If a 19th century house can theoretically absorb the trauma of a bad marriage into its floorboards, what does that mean for us today? When our houses are actively recording our worst arguments, our moments of highest anxiety, and the secrets we whisper when we think no one is listening.
Is technology creating a modern digital haunting?
What kind of data ghost are you leaving behind in the cloud of your own home?
That is a genuinely terrifying thought. It makes you want to unplug the router and move to a cabin.
It really does. Thank you for joining us on this incredibly deep dive into We Live Here Now. Keep your spaces bright, keep your windows open, maybe unplug the smart speaker every once in a while, and above all, keep your relationships honest.